You open your messages. You start typing. 3 sentences in, you stop. You read it back. You delete a word. You add it again. You change the whole opening, and then you close the app. The message sits there, unread by anyone but you, a ghost of something you almost said. Maybe you do this with one person. Maybe you do it with everyone. Maybe there are entire conversations that exist only in your drafts folder. Things you've been meaning to send for weeks. Feelings you've been rehearsing but never releasing. And here's the thing that makes this so strange. You knew exactly what you wanted to say. You still do. So why won't you send it? Before we go any further, you are not broken. You are not overthinking. You are not bad at communication. What you are is someone whose mind learned, at some point, that words can be dangerous, that saying the wrong thing has a cost, that being misunderstood hurts in a very specific way. Not because you failed to communicate, but because you tried and it still didn't land. And so your brain built a system, a soft, almost invisible system, one that gives you the feeling of connection without fully exposing you to the risk of it. The draft is not avoidance. The draft is protection. Picture this. You have something real to say to someone, something that matters, and as you begin typing, a second voice appears. What if they take this the wrong way? What if my tone doesn't come through? What if they think I'm too much, or not enough, or asking for something I have no right to ask for? So you revise, you soften, you rephrase, you try to account for every possible interpretation, every emotional landmine, every version of how this could go wrong. And somewhere in that process, the original feeling gets buried under all the edits. This is called anticipatory anxiety, the mind running through worst-case scenarios before anything has actually happened. It's the brain's way of trying to protect your relationships by presolving every conflict. The intention is good. The outcome is silence. There's a particular kind of person who grew up in an environment where tone mattered more than content, where what you said was less important than how it might be received, where getting it wrong, even slightly, meant something. For those people, the draft becomes a kind of emotional translation layer, a place to convert raw feeling into something safe enough to send. The problem is, safe enough never quite arrives. Here's something quieter underneath all of that. For a lot of people who draft and delete, what they're really afraid of isn't being misunderstood. It's being seen and still not being wanted. Attachment theory tells us that we each carry an internal working model of how relationships function, how reliable people are, how much we can ask for, how safe it is to need someone. And for those with anxious or avoidant attachment patterns, reaching out, even in a text message, activates that deeper system. Think about the last time you deleted a message to someone you cared about. Really sit with it. Was it just about the words? Or was there something older underneath a whisper that said, if I send this and they don't respond well, I will have my worst fears confirmed. That I am too much. That I ask for too much. That my needs make people leave. The draft keeps that fear at bay. As long as you don't send it, you can't be rejected. As long as you're still composing, the relationship exists in a state of possibility. Safe, suspended, unspoiled. But here's the part. Nobody tells you. The drafts themselves become a kind of relationship. Not with the person. With the feeling, you return to them. You edit them at midnight. You feel the weight of them sitting there, unsent, like unfinished business that keeps your connection to someone alive in a strange, private way. The draft is not the opposite of communication. For many people, it is the most honest communication they ever have, just with themselves. For some people, the drafting and deleting isn't really about the other person at all. It's about them. There's a form of perfectionism that isn't about achievement. It's about self-presentation, the deep, almost unconscious belief that if people knew the messy version of you, the uncertain, unpolished, emotionally complicated version, they would think less of you. And so you edit, not just your words, but yourself. Every draft is a negotiation between who you are and who you're afraid they expect you to be. You write the real thing first. Then you sand it down. Then you sand it down again. Until sometimes, there's nothing left to send. This often develops in people who were praised not for who they were, but for how well they performed. Children who learned that being articulate, composed, and appropriate earned love. And so expressing something unfinished, something still figuring itself out, felt like a risk to that love. Sometimes there's no childhood wound behind it. Sometimes it's just the weight of too many words in a world that never stops demanding them. We are asked to communicate constantly, professionally, personally, digitally, emotionally. And at a certain point, the nervous system simply starts to resist, not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. Sending a message requires a micro-decision. And when you've already made 500 micro-decisions today, that small action carries disproportionate weight. The draft sits there not because you're afraid, but because you're full. There is no more bandwidth. The message represents one more thing that will require a response, an emotional investment, a whole small conversation, and your system is already at capacity. In this case, the unsent message is less a fear response and more a quiet act of self-preservation, the kindest thing your overwhelmed brain could manage. What's interesting is how this behavior changes across your life without ever fully disappearing. As a teenager, you might have drafted texts to crushes, spending an hour on a message you eventually deleted because you couldn't bear the silence of a slow reply. The stakes felt enormous. The vulnerability felt total in your 20s. Maybe it shifted. You drafted messages to friends you'd drifted from, or to bosses, or to parents. The words were more complex. The fear more layered on your 30s and beyond. You might notice you draft things to yourself, notes in your phone that you never intend to send, emails you compose and save as drafts indefinitely. The medium changes, but the instinct remains to process through the act of writing without the risk of delivery. The behavior doesn't mean you're stuck. It means your mind has found a consistent way to handle things that feel too large to release all at once. That's not a flaw. That's a coping style that grew with you. Here is what the drafting is really doing. At its most fundamental level, it is giving your nervous system something to hold when emotions are large. When you miss someone, when you're hurt, when you need something and aren't sure how to ask, your system needs somewhere to put all of that. Writing is a container. The act of composing a message gives your feelings a shape. It transforms the formless pressure of emotion into something structured, something readable, something that feels a little less overwhelming. The draft is a blanket. Not the warmth of actual contact, but the feeling of weight, of being wrapped in something, of your feelings being held in form, even if they aren't yet held by another person. And sometimes, many times, that is enough. You send the message because you had to say it, even if only to yourself. The other person receiving it was always secondary to the relief of having named what you felt. So, if you are someone who drafts more than you send, here is what I want you to know. You are not failing at communication. You are not broken, or cowardly, or incapable of connection. You are someone who feels things carefully. Someone who understands that words have weight and treats them accordingly. The unsent messages in your phone are not evidence of your limitations. They are evidence of how much you care, how much you want to get it right, how deeply you understand that language, at its best, is an act of reaching. And that reaching carries risk. Some of those drafts will stay drafts, and that's okay. They served a purpose, even unread. They held something you needed to hold. They gave form to feelings that needed to exist somewhere, even briefly, even privately. You don't have to send everything to have said it. Sometimes the most honest conversation is the one only you ever see.